Just a little context. Zen Buddhism appeared in China around 300 BC, I'm sorry, 300 AD, 400. And Bodhidharma was considered the initial teacher of Zen. He was an Indian Buddhist who came to China to teach Zen, and so meditation, and so Zen began. A lot of Chinese culture didn't like Indian Buddhist culture. So the Indian Buddhist begged for food, and China thought that was a very low-class thing to do. And the Indian Buddhist didn't really do anything except meditate and teach. So they practiced and they taught. They practiced and they taught. And the Chinese culture thought that was kind of dumb. So when meditation began to be practiced in China, they developed what were temples, and the monks or nuns that lived in the temples did work. They raised produce, or they had a farm, or they had flax. They made cloth out of flax. They had a couple of like cottage industries. Also, they taught reading and writing. Because medieval China, roughly 650 or so, was a pretty unpleasant place to be, unless you were the emperor or a court person. They had a pretty easy life, food and shelter, and nice clothes. If you were a trader or a merchant, you did pretty well. Everybody else was basically in abject poverty, and they were illiterate. So if you were really poor, one way out of your poverty was to go to a temple and become a monk or a nun, because then the temple would feed you and you would be taught how to read or write. So the temples developed, sometimes they were sponsored by the emperor, but they often had to support themselves. And then in that environment, the practice of Zen went on. So they'd get up early, they'd chant for 30 or 40 minutes, they'd meditate for 2 or 3 hours, then they'd work in the fields, or they'd have breakfast, then they'd work, they'd have lunch, then they'd work, they'd have dinner, then they'd chant, then they'd meditate, and they'd go to bed. And it was kind of like that all the time. So in the context of that, the Zen master would give a talk like I'm doing today, just maybe twice a week. And Chang was the name of this Zen master, and he was named after the mountain. So this would be something like Idlewild, Zen master Idlewild, because it's part of the non-self thing. The guy's identity was just where he was, where he taught. So Chang is the name of the mountain, and Chang is also the name of the leader of this particular temple. He's giving a Dharma talk, and he notices a stranger in the back who's not one of his monks or nuns, and who comes in, listens to the talk, and then leaves without introducing himself or saying anything. A few days later, he gives another Dharma talk, blah, 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 and he notices the stranger is in the back again, but then leaves without introducing himself. So this repeats itself 4 or 5 times. And the teacher doesn't do anything. He just carries on like normal. Around the 6th time, then the stranger approaches the teacher and introduces himself. He says, "Hi, I used to be the Zen master of this temple 100 years ago or so, and my name was also Chang. However, when I was the teacher here, one of the monks asked me a question, and I gave him the wrong answer. And because I gave the wrong answer, when I died, I was reborn as a fox. And I've lived as a fox 500 fox lifetimes." Now, I think a fox lifetime is maybe 15 years or so you guys can do the math, I'm not sure. So he says so the original Chang says to the living Chang, "Can I please ask you this question? And if I can get a correct answer, I won't be reborn as a fox. I'll be able to be reborn as a human being," which is a big privilege in the Buddhist pantheon of things. That's the number one place to be reborn. So the living Pai Chang says, yeah, sure, ask me the question. What is the question? And he says, oh, the monk asked me, does an enlightened person fall under the laws of cause and effect? And when I was asked this question, I said no. And hence was reborn a fox for 500 lifetimes. So the living Pai Chang hears this, and so the ghost or the dead guy says, can you give me the correct answer? And he says, oh, cause and effect are clear. So the Pai Chang, the first Pai Chang hears this and attains a deep insight and says, please do me a big favor. There's this boulder about 1/4 mile away from the temple. Behind the boulder, there's this bush, and behind the bush, there's a cave. There's a dead fox's body in there. Could you please get it and give it a human burial? So the Zen master sends the monks off to ring the big bell that there's going to be a funeral. And that also tells everybody out in the field and all that something's up. So they ring the big bell, and the monks are all going, nobody was in the infirmary, nobody's been sick, who could have died? Who died? And the Zen master walks out with his big staff, and they make a little, parade, and walk, and he goes to the boulder, then he goes to the bush, he sticks around with his stick, and there's the dead body of a fox. So they pull that fox out, and then they cremate it, and they do a bunch of special chanting and bury it. So that's the story. And in the koan, then there are a sequence of questions to sort of test the clarity of the person's mind that's studying the koan. And this is a popular koan, I think partly because it's so complicated, has a lot of pieces to it. I wanted to talk about just a couple of pieces of it. The first is, does an enlightened person fall under the laws of cause and effect? What was wrong with the first guy's answer? His answer came out of opposites thinking. He says no. And that caused him to be reborn as a fox for giving an unclear teaching in the context of the story. If he had said yes, it also would have been the wrong answer, because yes comes out of our opposites thinking as well. Our true nature is before all opposites, good and evil, right and wrong, yes and no. And the second Pai Chang, when he's presented with the question, he just reflects, oh, cause and effect are clear. That is an answer that just mirrors the reality. It just mirrors what he's just been presented with. The second Pai Chang isn't controlled by opposites thinking, like, does an enlightened person fall under the laws of cause and effect, or do they not? Does enlightenment take away our karma? That's another question that's hidden under this. Like, oh, if I get enlightenment, then does all my karma, my habitual thinking, my trauma, all of this, does that go away? And then do I become free? So this is an interesting point of confusion in the practice. The Buddha's teaching has a single taste, liberation. And that's liberation from our thinking, from our habitual habit mind. It is not the annihilation of our thinking. Our thinking continues, but we're not controlled by it. We use our thinking to help this world, help ourselves, help this world. But if we think our thinking is going to disappear, or that it's bad, or that it's good, then we're caught up in opposites thinking. And once we're caught up in that, then our karma, our habits of, oh, I like this and I don't like that, that habitual mind of thinking is controlling us. The other thing I want to point to is, if we're practicing, we are already Buddha. In the Heart Sutra, it says, no attainment with nothing to attain. This is the Mahayana teaching from the Buddha, in the sense that everybody who's born a human being is a Buddha already. But their thinking and their feeling, their habit mind, has taken them off the clear participation in the world as a Buddha. And once you sit still and pay attention to your experience, you're now a Buddha. You are generating good karma in the sense that you're not generating any bad karma. You've become still. You've returned to zero. But if you become clear, which we all do, then we can help. And helping, of course, is good karma. And making things worse, of course, is bad karma. But if you extinguish your mind, then your karma is also extinguished. But what happens is our minds are reignited, and so then our karma is reignited. And then we practice some meditation, and we extinguish our mind. So then our karma is extinguished. And then it's rinse and repeat. We make this whole story about ourselves, what's good, what's bad, what's right with the world, what's wrong with the world, what we're going to do, what we hate, what we like, who we argue with, who we don't argue. We make all of that. But then we practice, we let it all go, we become clear, then we make it all again. Now, if we can just reside in being clear, then we see the truth we're in actually for what it is. And our wisdom and compassion are to the fore. And then we know what to do, and we don't suffer. We can use our experience of suffering to tell us, oh, I'm not in my don't know center because I'm suffering. So suffering is like a street sign. You're on suffering lane. There's a way out. Just keep a question. Just ask yourself, what is this? And then suffering lane turns into action. It turns into insight. It turns into self-understanding. It turns into understanding the people around us. Insight's a better word than understanding. We see into the whole situation, and we take care of ourselves and we take care of others all at the same time. It becomes a win-win. Then if we lose track of that, or if we don't have to lose track of it, things will change. That's the other teaching of the Buddhas, everything's impermanent. So we're on suffering lane, we practice, we're suddenly on nirvana lane, everything's going smoothly, then things change. And we lose something we love, or something we don't like comes into our lap. Now we're back on suffering lane. So we practice, we have insight, then we're into nirvana lane. Oh, this is working out pretty well. Then something changes, and we're back into suffering lane. However, we can sort of develop a habit of practice, not just formal practice, not just sitting on the cushion and being still and staying in our before-thinking mind. We can keep that before-thinking mind, which is just a question, just curiosity. What is this? In the front. We just keep what is this in the front, and then we're able to act and speak clearly with wisdom and compassion. That's an awake person. Now, if we think to ourselves, oh, this feels like I'm awake has two mistakes. It has I in it, and then awake, because awake is an opposite. It has asleep as the opposite. That's all thinking. So back to Pai Chang, Zen Master Pai Chang, when the ghost asks him, is an enlightened person controlled by the laws of cause and effect. A person who's awake has no I, my, me. And so when Zen Master Pai Chang hears that, he just reflects. Cause and effect are clear, moment by moment. So we don't even need to ask that question, because the question has a mistake in it. The question has the imaginary person. Our personhood is a conditional component. It's constantly changing. Our true nature is not changing. It is a constant. It's not touched by life or death, as is pointed out in the Heart Sutra. So no life, no death, no extinction, no birth, no death, no extinction of birth and death. So that, at first glance, is pretty confusing. But what the Buddha is pointing us to is this middle place where being born is an extreme idea and dying is also an extreme idea. And Buddha's teaching is the middle of those two extremes. We're here, and we're participating, and we're in a constant state of transformation. So we transform, we transform, we transform. Nothing was actually ever born. It was just transformation, transformation. Things came together, something appears. It's here for a while. Things separate, they disappear. As long as we don't attach to the thing that appears, is here for a while, and then disappears, we don't suffer. And the thing that appears and then disappears, it can be a mountain, it can be an ocean, it can be a person, it can be an emotion, it can be a feeling, it can be our thinking, it can be our children. Everything appears, it's here for a certain amount of time, and then it disappears. A human being that sees into how fluid all of this is and is game to participate, is willing to love being alive so much, I'm going to play, and I'm not going to worry about how all this is going to change. So bad things happen to human beings. We still get toothaches. We still have trauma. We still get cancer diagnoses. We still are of the nature to get sick, get older, and die. That's our nature. It's actually the nature of everything. We weren't singled out. And there's this extraordinary beauty in things changing. It's how we get a sunset. You know, it's how we get a child growing into a teenager, into an adult. It's how we get inventions. It's how we get cures and remedies for illness. So all of this good comes out of impermanence. And when we see into it, that can help us relax and know that this doesn't have to be controlled. It just needs to be seen into and then skillfully navigated. So I had one teacher who would sing the song, "Row, row, row your boat merrily down the stream." And then I had another teacher say, yeah, it's a lot like just surfing the waves of karma. You just surf the situation you're in, and you don't sweat it. You just do the best you can. And we all see our shortcomings. We all see our flaws. We all have these strong emotions. But when we can attain them, they teach us what they need to teach us, then we're free from them, and then we use them. So the one point about the Mahayana view is the function of karma, or the function of suffering. Yes, we want suffering to end, but that process of suffering ending, we learn how to use our suffering to help this world. So suffering has a couple of different kinds of functions, and if people are on their game, they catch on to that. And so rather than, this is just shitty, I feel awful, I wish this would go away, why me, why me? I hate everybody, who can I take this out on? Who can I beat up? You know, instead of that being the mindset or the emotional set, we go, oh, what is this? What is this coming from? What's the root of this? Then we look way into the root, way into the root. We attain the root of our own suffering. Oh, I can let that go. It might not be easy, but it's always possible. Then there's a very different view. It's a view that is so wide it includes everything. It includes all of our experience. This is thought-feeling composite, and it also includes everybody else's thought-feeling composite. And then, okay, well, what's the best that can be done? What's the best we can do? It may not always be good. Like, sometimes even doing the best thing in a situation doesn't really help very much. But we've just done the best we can in that bad situation. The bad situation unfolding, that's just the way things are, what we're in the middle of. We can either help it, be part of the cure, be part of the repair, or we can just not help it, and then it's any number of things. So I guess those are my points. This idea of enlightenment, when we become awake, are we free of our karma? Are we not free of our karma? I would say when we're awake, we use our karma for this world. That was the same teaching that Sung Sung gave me and the people I was practicing with. And so we're not practicing for our karma to go away. We're practicing to digest our karma and then use it. So, and karma is, the way I'm using it is everything, like I'm a white guy, I'm gay, I'm 70 years old. That's all my karma. So how do I use it in the situations I'm in? I have children, I have parents, I have siblings. How do I use those relationships? I had obligations, I had to support people, I had talent, I had this, I had that. How did I use that to take care of myself, take care of the world I was in? And at some point, all of the world I am in will disappear. And can I be okay with that? No. But I'm okay with not being okay with it. Yes, I will fight and cry and bawl and everything else, but that'll be okay. That's basically the only difference. I had a toothache. I had wisdom teeth pulled 2 weeks ago. It was horrible. Oh, they did a great job, no complications, but when all that science wears off, and you're, whoa, this was different. Groaning there in the bed. But I was okay with just lying there groaning like a wounded animal. Grateful somebody didn't take my teeth out in a bar fight. That would have been a lot worse.